You can't do Google ads unless you do tricks to work around the system. You can't do meta ads unless you do tricks to work around the system. You can't do SMS without doing, again, tricks to work around the system. And so we kind of took this standpoint as like, well, how can we follow the rules, not be an asshole, not try to break all the rules and still generate results? And so really what we found the best way to do it is to focus on the assets that are not going to get taken down, that you can own. And so where are those two assets? Typically, your Google business profile, your Apple profile, and your own website. And so on your own website, you can also connect with your own tools to kind of control the inventory and do your POS. The biggest problem, honestly, is compliance and being able to work around things in the right manner without breaking all the rules and still generating results. And it's a really complicated thing. It's always changing. And I think that's why there is a big need for people in marketing that can kind of follow these rules.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cannabis Accounting Podcast. Today I have with me Samuel Fisher, the co-founder of Green Dispensary Marketing, GDM for short. For those who don't know, he's on the marketing side of the cannabis industry, has lived abroad for a little bit and has just recently been living in Colorado, based out of there. But I'll let you introduce yourself, Samuel, to those who don't know you yet, or Green Dispensary Marketing.
Yeah, well, first things first, shout out to Raymond Guns and the Dope CFO team. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. My name is Samuel Fisher, co-founder of Green Dispensary Marketing. Kind of got into this working with other agencies for, I don't know, since 2016. I used to have a degree in history and was a teacher for a while. And ended up deciding that I wanted to have a remote location independent lifestyle. And so that got me into marketing. Started off as copywriting. Then, within 5 years, found myself being in charge of this big old, what's called a parasite SEO vertical, just in charge of writers, editors, the whole shebang. That kind of filtered into things like outreach and then general marketing strategy. And so it took me a little bit to realize hey, I should probably jump off and do this on my own. I have a lot of skills and knowledge. And I know how to do this, kind of copy paste some systems for local cannabis dispensaries and brands. And that's in short how I got here, Raymond. And excited to be here. We're going to 2026. Lots of big things to come for this year in cannabis, and lots of things to discuss. And I'm sure you have lots of great questions. And so excited to be here.
Nice. And I do remember backpacking back in 2012 when it was still called backpacking, and most of the backpackers were marketing people. I like the phrase location independent professionals. All right, this is a backpacker who works from a laptop. Nowadays it's just called working remote, but you were clearly way ahead of the curve, but I love it. Yeah, so you've been in marketing for a while. So I guess just kind of what did you learn outside of the cannabis industry and just some of your early, experiences of working for marketing companies that you brought, to the early days of cannabis companies when you started working with them, or really just started your own practice?
Yeah, it kind of started, as I was mentioning, my first kind of remote gig, what really got my foot in the door, shall we say, into marketing was generally copywriting. And the big strategy at the time, this is 2015 or 2016, shit, it was really 10 years ago, was something called
I'm in cannabis 10 years.
Affiliate marketing was a huge thing, right? And so a lot of people had these Amazon niche websites. And I was traveled around the world, essentially, 30 different countries, just helping people, consulting for these kind of companies. And then eventually, this would have been 2022, got a job for one of the gig rig SEO companies. We're talking about you search in best cannabis seeds, at least at the time, best cannabis, this and that, best cannabis dispensary. We would be number 1, number 2, number 3. And we had this really this good strategy hammered out, something called parasite SEO, which basically, you kind of leverage, be a parasite, suck the authority, these big platforms. For example, I got published on New York Times, not in my name, got published on Denver Post, not in my name, Mercury News, that one actually wasn't my name, SACB, lots of different places, just doing good SEO optimized content to, at the time, I also do affiliate marketing for big cannabis brands. And so I kind of realizes, hey, there's a big opportunity there. There's a big opportunity in having your own assets and your own websites as opposed to depending on other people's platforms and authorities, and also local SEO. When you're typing in things like, hey, I want a dispensary near me, the top 3 results are always going to be Google business profiles. If you're on Apple, Safari, it's going to be Apple profiles. And so it's hey, what can we do? So it kind of came up with this idea. So, why don't we just offer local visibility for local dispensaries, and at the same time, kind of help them own the front page using many of the same strategies that were previously done by this other agency. And so here I am, 2025, we're not the biggest in town. We're not worried about money. We're not worried about our income and paying rent and all that stuff. And I think that's evidence in itself that we're doing something right.
Yeah, I would agree. Nice. Could you tell me a little bit about like the nuances? Because I hear this about, and this is just like pure ignorance of like just the difficulties marketing in cannabis versus marketing for traditional companies. Like I know a lot of the traditional places we would market, just have restrictions on keywords and so on and so forth. But just at a high level, so some of the audience who aren't privy to the problems marketing people in the cannabis industry are solving, can you just tell me what some of the hurdles are, differences between traditional marketing or marketing for a traditional business versus marketing for a cannabis company?
Oh, well, we could go on. We could have a whole episode on this because, as now that we're kind of moving into Schedule 3, maybe things will lighten up. But there's curtains, black curtains, or what's the word? The bans, shadow bans, problems on just about any sort of platform. You can't do Google ads unless you do tricks to work around the system. You can't do Meta ads unless you do tricks to work around the system. You can't do SMS without doing, again, tricks to work around the system. And so we kind of took this standpoint as like, well, how can we follow the rules, not be an asshole, not try to break all the rules and still generate results? And so really what we found the best way to do it is to focus on the assets that are not going to get taken down, that you can own. And so where are those two assets? Typically, your Google business profile, your Apple profile, and your own website. And so on your own website, you can also connect, with your own tools to kind of control the inventory and your POS. But I'm kind of going in circles here, but the biggest problem, honestly, is compliance and being able to work around things in the right manner without breaking all the rules and still generating results. And it's a really complicated thing. It's always changing. And I think that's why there is a big need for people in marketing that can kind of follow these rules. I think one of the big ones, one of the big topics, I'm sure we'll talk about this, is the new the hemp laws. Previously, I was talking about parasite SEO. A lot of these people could just go on these national platforms like the New York Times and to do things like best THC gummies and, have their THCA products and then just sell them that way. That's going to be a big shakeup in 2026 is that people aren't going to be able to do that sort of stuff. And they're going to have to depend more and more on their own platforms. They're going to need people who know how to help them build their own platforms. And it's a big thing. You can either deal with 5,000 different tech glitches and problems and hosting issues and this, that, and the third, and the code fucking up, or you can just have somebody else who's good at it do it for you and save you all the time, take all that, leave extra time on your plate. I don't know if I answered the question correctly there.
Nah, a little bit. We'll get to the hemp stuff in a second, but no, because it's just like, that's kind of a reality. Is like, yeah, it's like most professional product CPG or just products type companies, like they don't really need to worry about their socials getting shut down. It's federally legal product selling. That's why they're able to sell them in the open. Every state kind of allows them to sell it within reason, and so that's definitely a thing. And obviously it's just like, it's for better or for worse, for sure, e-commerce is a thing, but social media does drive a lot of sales, and the companies that kind of figure out how to attach a product to like a social media following, it's kind of works out usually. So that is definitely something that needs to be like fixed. But to your point, like the solve is like, well, try to get on people onto your own websites, your own areas you can control to drive revenue at the end of the day. Because that's all we're trying to do. Okay. No, that does make sense. And so to your point, it's obviously I'm biased as well as the service provider. It's like, well, it's like you could try to figure out the accounting and finance and the nuances to 280E and 471 C11 and all the little ways around these tax, strategies, or you just work with somebody who just does it full time. Like, cause you got to pay either way. Nothing's free. Either paying an internal marketing manager and an external marketing manager. At the end of the day, you just need marketing and advertising to drive sales and revenue up. So no, that definitely makes sense. But yeah, I guess that was a good segue. I appreciate the softball into the new hemp. I know things still need to play out, but for sure, like I saw it in Wisconsin where it used to be hemp derived THC, and then just somehow over time it was just THC, and I was like,
No, it's not.
oh no, it got legalized in my home state, and we definitely have no medical or adult use THC cannabis. Like I know everything's still hemp derived, but it's just like somehow, and so like went from like hemp derived THC to just like THC, and then sometimes they would call it THCA, but now they just call it THC. So I guess just high level, what were some of the early days like marketing for these companies? Because they did have the ability to do e-commerce. Interstate commerce was huge, like just from a pure like addressable market and the ability to drive sales at like a cost that makes sense. Interstates does matter. So I guess what was it like working some of the hemp companies and their marketing early days, and how has it changed to where we are now? And then to your point, what should we be concerned about in the future?
I kind of reference Seth Yakatan. He has this term BDOM, big dumb pile of money, or BD pong. And some of these hemp companies, they were making ridiculous money for the longest time, because they had a national presence. They found this workaround. It was legit. The police were backing it up. They could send threats. But basically, to kind of answer your question, they had so much money that they didn't really know where to throw it around. And so, yeah, they do SEO, they would do Google ads, Meta ads, anything they could really get their hands on that could show some sort of demonstrable ROI. Whereas nowadays, you can really notice the fear and the fear kicking in. And it's almost like at this point right now, with clients that I'm still working with that haven't tapped out yet, it's more of like, I don't want to use the word delusional, but they're just convinced that this is not happening, that what's about to happen is not going to happen because they can't shut down a $300 billion or whatever it is, 30 billion. I don't know.
30 billion.
30 billion. Yeah, it is. Ask the CPA. But some of these people are spending like $300,000 a month in meta ads. It's just like, whereas nowadays it's like, it's starting to dry up. And so really, I don't know where I'm going with this, kind of going off on a tangent here, but really I think a lot of the smart players in that industry are starting to transition and look for ways to get into the legal market.
Yeah. But to your point, just big picture, it was a bit of a, because I watched it too, just from like the numbers of like, for sure, like the hemp beverage, like that's what I was able to see most visibly, like just because they were most visible with their products. Obviously hemp edibles like had their run, but it's just like, they were the most recent one. And so, yeah, it's definitely changed. And I guess that's kind of a question I had, which is a good segue from just the hemp, because it is going to change. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, to your point, some are getting out, some are trying to pivot, but that's business. Because it's like be more regulated market, we're trying to pivot into hemp. Now it's kind of interesting because most people never it was always an ad. It's not like people like shut down operations to try to like make hemp products. They just added another SKU, and it's like now they have to like pull that back. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
A good chunk of the industry to go backwards, or people lose their jobs, but it's also like the industry is always in flux or evolving, so it is what it is. But kind of like moving on to like another question that always comes up on marketing, and this is just more like kind of big, kind of like high level, like marketing managers, people in your position, like how do you explain the ROI to the team, or like show the ROI on the marketing spend, and say like an example of $300K per month? Like the simple math is like if we could tie $300K marketing for spend and then X amount of sales come in, and that's always higher than the marketing budget, it was a positive ROI, but there's a lot of other costs worked in there. So I guess like, what are some key metrics you use to track ROI? And what are some metrics where it's like, those don't really matter, those are hype metrics?
Yeah. So, to kind of clarify, most of what, we do offer compliant ads, programmatic ads. But at the same time, most of what I do showing ROI and reporting, and most of my skill set is in the customer acquisition through organic search, AI search, that sort of stuff. And so how do you show the ROI? Well, we've gotten to the point now, for the past couple of years, the biggest two places that I would usually reference would be sales on the website that we can track coming from Google, which is, pretty easy. So some people say you can't track a ROI with SEO. I said, well, what if you can show that they go to the site, they click on this, they buy this, and then you compare that with how much you're charging a month. Also, if you line it up with, increases in direction requests, and direction requests is a huge one, with your Google business profile. If they're going to your profile, clicking directions, that's probably, we give or take a few that are just doing it just because most people are coming into the store and buying something. Some people spend, $150, some people spend $200. Well, I usually calculate down to just be really conservative, is like $45 per direction request. And so if we increased it by this much since we started working together, after 90 days, here's the ROI that you're getting. And it usually, with my work, before I get under the hood, when I get under the hood, I can kind of tell if we're going to be able to deliver any sort of results. And so I do my best to kind of investigate beforehand to see, hey, you're missing this and this. We will 100% get you an ROI on this. I'm going to close the door, man. I got the sun coming on my face. 1 second.
Good thing that. But that is interesting. Like, I do like that. It's like, that's something that I really considered of like, because it's like sales is like the end result. And so like, but it's too big of a number. You got to like go down this, what drove that end monthly sales number? It was like purchases, buying customers. How did the customers find us? And then bringing it full circle. And that is interesting direction request. Cause yeah, it's like if they go to I've done it before, like Google dispensaries near me. I travel a lot for work. I got to find one and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'll just go to this one because it's closest to my hotel. Mm.
SEO wins. And how did they get to that number one spot? It wasn't through luck, Raymond. You know, you can talk shit about the SEO, and a lot of people talk shit about the SEO, but there's some tricks and there's some easy ways to ensure that you get there.
No, I like that. I think that it is interesting. I guess like, and just for fun, like, I guess why do people talk shit about SEO and marketing? And I ask because a lot of people talk shit about accounting and finance. Like, all right, what do you do? Why are you so expensive? But I'm like, dude, trust me, your business will run better with me here. But like, take me out of it, put yourself in there. Like, why do people talk shit about marketing all the time?
I don't know. I think, a big problem that
Kind of joking.
there's probably many ways to answer it that even I haven't considered, to be honest with you. But honestly, the way that I would see it is a lot of people make big grandiose promises on the front end, and especially with SEOs. Hey, we're going to triple your sales within 90 days, 100%. Then after 90 days, there's nothing. And, many operators have ran into this experience more than once. And so, it turns into a stereotype. Say, oh yeah, well, they're just like shitty company over here that just makes big grandiose promises, doesn't deliver shit. And I would imagine just the same with CPA stuff, overcharging. And then it's like, well, how much money did we save on taxes? Wait, didn't we save more last year? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. It's just the golden rule. It's like under promise, over deliver. Switching gears a little bit here, just because I know like you do like to travel. Obviously, like you're in the cannabis industry, and so, like naturally worlds collide. It's the nature of life. And so tell us a little bit about kind of just like I know you're living in Peru, so a little bit about cannabis market there, and then just overall kind of I know you visited a conference in Peru as well, but just like your take on the current global cannabis industry today and where do you see it going, and I guess specifically to Latin America.
I think while we're on the topic, Latin America is going to be where the next big green boom is. It's difficult with politics and governments and decision makers in those governments, kind of tweaking things. But if we take Peru as an example, they already have, and this is subject to change given, the change that's recently happened in the United States, they already have the equivalent of the Farm Bill in Peru. And so many parts of the country have, those THCAs, the Delta beverages over the counter that you can buy and that police aren't raiding those places. And maybe it's just because it's Latin America, it's corrupt, whatever, but it is there. At the same time, they also have a medical market. It's a little clunky where you go to a doctor, you pay a doctor, it would be $15 for, a prescription. And it's just a one-time prescription. And then you go to the medical dispensary and then buy whatever products you have. And they are a little expensive. And so what I've noticed so far is that the black market is still kind of dominating just because it's hard to beat really cheap and high-quality weed. But I think that there is massive room for growth, especially, when local infrastructure starts to, produce their own products and have their own farms and stuff like that. It's going to be huge because obviously, it's popular in Latin America. I think the big issue is how are we going to tax it? How are we going to make sure that all hell doesn't break loose? I know a lot of people thought that was going to happen in the United States, especially in like places like Colorado. Say, oh, they're going to legalize marijuana and everybody's going to be crazy and everybody's going to turn into zombies. And what the hell is going to happen? Well, here I am in Colorado. Business as usual. Same shit, different day. If anything, we're making more money for the schools with ridiculously high taxes. And I don't have to worry about going to some shady dealer who's gonna, lace me with fentanyl or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, it's like anything. It'll come along slowly but surely. It's like as the medical benefit like kind of become more well known, which I guess you're in the state with the new executive order, coming into play, being signed recently. Like obviously, there's a lot more talk about like movement at the federal level. And once the United States, has some type of movement of rescheduling and recognition of medical benefits of cannabis, there should be some trickle down effect to other legislation at other countries that kind of, look to the United States for direction. It's like, what is your take on that thesis? Is that real or how is it short sighted? Like what do you take?
To a certain extent, I think a lot of people, what do I know, Greatman? I'm not an expert on international politics and whatever. But we can spitball on this. I think to a certain extent, a lot of people do respect the United States just for more than one thing, our military and our economic strength. At the same time, there's a lot of negative opinion and thoughts towards the United States from multiple different places, and cultures and subcultures. And so I think it's kind of take it with a grain of salt, to be honest with you. Is like, yeah, we should definitely take serious what's going on over there. But at the same time, these are separate countries that try to do things their own way in Latin America. And so that's why, I think in Uruguay, they already have a legal market. It's nothing. It's not really similar to any legal market that we have here in the United States.
That is interesting, right? It's like they're still going to move kind of at their own pace, and like there's still a stigma about it for sure. It's like, no, like it's still like a stigma in other countries. So they're still going to move at their own pace, and like, yeah, there may be
Yep.
some loosening or expediting of things, but it's not going to be a light switch by any means. And I think to your point, the people who have a bit more hubris are like, no, it's a light event. It's going to be like life changing. And it's like, no, like it's a catalyst event. It will be a start to the next phase, but it's not going to change things overnight. Like unprofitable cannabis companies still need to get profitable. Medical markets still need to get an adult use. I live in Wisconsin. We still need to get a medical market in the state of Wisconsin to get an adult use market. So like all that stuff still takes months and years realistically. So it's a bit of a long-term play.
You made a good point of the taboo too. Before we change gears, I talked to two specific experts in Peru about this. It's like, hey, yeah, you guys have like ayahuasca and mescaline, and like, these are hard drugs that you have legal that nobody cares. These are over the counter. You can sell them at the local corner shop. What's so bad about cannabis? And the biggest response that I've gotten so far is, well, cannabis isn't native to Peru. It's not native to Latin America, and so that's why.
That is interesting. Oh, yeah, man. That makes sense. That makes sense. No, that is. It's yeah. And obviously, other cultures have more experience with it than others, and then even within countries, there's subcultures and regions. Like obviously in the States, we have like the West Coast and some of the markets where it's just kind of much more been a thing. Whereas, yeah, more conservative states, it's like it's definitely still much more taboo. So to each their own.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, just back to Colorado, because I know you're there. And I just try to like, I don't know, I use the people that are boots on the ground in local markets, because even though it's still, there's movement, it's still very much, at least in the United States, a state by state game. Obviously there is multi-state operators, but it's just slightly different in every state, but also obviously same. But I guess in your experience, kind of, how has Colorado changed? It was one of those like early adult use states that like kind of were, other states were looking at to learn from. So I guess what lessons have other states learned from Colorado, and what is the current state of the Colorado market?
Well, current state, it's probably a little bit more fear than greed at this point. If we're going to use like the crypto fear greed index, if you're familiar with that, probably a high level of fear. Just there's a lot of players in Colorado. What was the other question? There was another question there.
Just kind
I
of
want to
like
make sure I touch upon all.
because they were looking at it for a while. Like, what have some other states learned from
Yeah.
Colorado? Companies from Colorado that they can apply to their own cannabis companies in different states.
Honestly, there's a lot of money in this too, especially when we kind of consider tax revenue. And if we kind of are careful with where we put that revenue from the taxes, we can do a lot more good than bad. I personally don't think using cannabis is bad. You can definitely abuse it just like anything else. But as the example of Colorado, I think it's like 30% tax for you. It's ridiculous. A heavy bulk of that goes to public schooling and kids. The next generation. I think if you were to kind of pull a lesson from Colorado, it's like, well, we can do this and do good things with it at the same time. But the current state right now, to be honest with you, like where I live on Garden City currently, there's probably 5 dispensaries in the same block, and it's like heavily saturated. And so really, I think a big struggle for them is, one, to have good products, good prices, but also higher visibility and making sure that they're found first. And then retaining those customers. Shout out one of my partners, Steph Rona. She owns High Def Studio. She crushes it with helping stores like that bring customers in more than once. It's something we can help with, but I definitely love to show love where love is due. And I'm not an expert in retention. I know Steph Rona, High Def Studio, but they're great at it.
Nice. I think you did bring up a good point of the saturation, and obviously like there's a lot of murmurs about consolidation, and that's kind of been the talk from some of the capital M&A type people in the industry. And so I guess just from your experience from the marketing perspective, like how does that affect the marketing perspective when you're marketing for say a mom and pop versus an MSO, or Yeah, we'll just use those as an example.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the level of operations and systems that they have in place already too. And so, oftentimes when people are onboarding me, I kind of have to plug and play to what they're working with, whether it be like Dutchy or trees or, what have you. It's on one hand, it depends on what they're already working with. On the other hand, I'm trying to find ways that I can kind of collab and, if I generate unique value on my own front, sometimes maybe it's we set up a review landing page for you. Sometimes it's maybe we just take your whole website off your hands. Maybe we make you a brand new website, incorporate with your Dutchy trees, and then also ensure that your inventory when you purchase a product on that store, that it also goes on your inventory on your POS end. Kind of going in a circle here. I'm not sure if I answered your question completely here.
No, you did. No, makes sense. It's just slightly a little different depending on kind of where they're at and kind of obviously size of them dictates budget. At the end of the day, it's like it's just is what it is. But that makes sense. Kind of just look into the future here. Obviously, I like to be. We still got to solve the problems of today, but like from a marketing perspective, like where do you see marketing changing in 2026? Like what's going to have the most impact on how you market in 2026? And I guess is what has you excited for 2020.
All right, let's talk about this Schedule 3 1080 thing, 1080E thing. Where Raymond 280? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I think. What do I know? Who knows? But I talked to somebody smarter than me, Jeffrey Hoffman, he's a cannabis attorney in New York. He thinks that this whole Schedule 3 thing is going to kind of open up the door for like a big pharmaceutical company like Pfizer, for example, to kind of take over the industry. Some people kind of see the exact opposite. This is just a great opportunity. I don't know. The way I kind of see it is I don't really know, but what I do think is going to happen is that people that work in marketing that previously had to go above and beyond to show their value, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, don't have to be as good at what they're doing, just because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the accountant here, we're going to be tax deductible here soon, my man. We're talking about, $3,000 that we spend on a marketing campaign that, well, it's also tax deductible. And I think that's where we're going with this 2026. I think it's going to be maybe something that introduces new players, new competitors into the industry, maybe kind of lowers the quality and the expectations of marketing services as a whole. But also, at the same time, for people like myself, it lowers sales resistance and it makes it easier for us to get in the door and offer value to companies that really need it without, them stressing on the back end about if they're really getting an ROI, which obviously they should. But if it's tax deductible, that's what I see. What do you see, man?
No, the pure like cash flow economics of it are similar to what you just described. Just to keep things high level, to not nerd out too much, but for sure, it's like less tax is going to get paid to the government. That just frees up cash flow. Like just if you look at the effective tax rates, it's high for cannabis companies, especially those at the retail level. So like less cash goes out to taxes equals more cash stays here. We can use that cash to pay for marketing, accounting, investors, refinance, dividends, distributions. And yeah, whether you use a lot of people use the word deductible, it's really just like it lowers your taxable income because essentially you get pretty much just your COGS right now. Then all of SG&A or operational expenses, depending on what you believe or follow, essentially because of 280E, they don't factor those in. So everybody just pays taxes at this like gross margin. And so, yeah, it will be essentially like, it'll be tax deductible, which in theory, it's like, yeah, it kind of lowers the fee, but it makes it more like a normal business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So into the weeds of like, is it deductible? Is it a credit? Is it just lower your taxable income? It just makes cannabis more like normal businesses. And for like an industry that's been operating for like 5 to 10 years, or companies that have been around for like 5 to 10 years that have been like used to paying a pretty high tax rate, or it is going to free up cash flows. And so that's a good thing.
100%.
Yeah.
It's better in our pockets than in Uncle Sam's,
That's just it. It's like 100%. It's like, well, that is definitely going to go somewhere. And of course, some companies weren't paying it, and that's like a whole different conversation. But just like going forward, economically, the industry is going to be doing better. That free cash flow, because it can also be used to pay back investors, is going to encourage more investors to come in. And so, yeah, it's like a unique thing. And then a lot of cannabis companies that wanted to sell got them evaluated at an all-time high in 21, 22, and then it's went shit down 23, 24, 25. They also are going to want to make transitions right now. They're like, okay, this should percolate some investor interest. And so that also,
you'd think, right? Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Everything's cyclical, right? It can only go down for so long before it kind of there's a new positive catalyst, and so we're just
Yeah.
kind of through that. But only time will tell. I'm just like you, Sam. I'm just a humble professional in the cannabis industry. I don't have a crystal ball. I can just speak from like my experience and theses. But so
Same here.
no investor claims are being made on this. Just kidding. But then the final question was, I guess, just you personally, professionally, what has you excited about 2026 and green marketing and dispensary? Like, do you have any new markets you guys are going after? Any like what has excited for 2026 to end on a high note?
So we are currently in the process of building various things. We're first things first. We're building one of the best, or one of the only, shall we say, or if not the only, listing management platform for cannabis. And so, what the hell is that, Sam? It's one of the ways that you can. It's one of it's one of the great ways that you can ensure that your local map rankings, your Google business profile stays up, is to have listings on authoritative sites. And so a big problem with that is it's hard to control all the different user logins, where your listings are, where you posted, where you already went, making sure that your name, address, phone number is all the same. And so we're centralizing that all into one platform for 2026. We've been building this for a long time. Another thing we're continuing to build is our compliant ads offering. We're switching from offering more hemp compliant ads to more local dispos. It's something that we're continuing the process and get better and improve at. And so that's something that I'm really excited about. Really excited about the Schedule 3, despite some people saying it's going to be brimstone and apocalypse or whatever. I personally don't think so, but what do I know? We'll see. And just hoping that we get some new good news laws in our place for 2026. Is because this new Schedule 3 thing is what the biggest thing that's happened in 50 years, Raymond, something like that.
Let's say if you can't get excited about that, that's just gonna. I don't know what it's gonna take. And
Yeah.
I think with you, I'm kind of excited about it as well. And I think that is interesting. A listing management, kind of like, because I get it, right. There's other like websites, like I think of like government websites where they're like, hey, they can like make a request for a proposal, they're good to go. Whether it's professional services, legal, accounting, so it definitely makes sense. And then yeah, I'm excited about 280. Like obviously cautiously optimistic. There's still problems we're solving today. There's still shit that needs to get done today. But like, if you can't get like at least a little excited about that, then you're just kind of gonna be like, it's gonna take a lot to get you excited. So like, you gotta take the wins along the way, or else it's just a miserable chain of successes. And it's like I don't need that in my life. So now I'm right there with you. But thanks so much for your time, Samuel. This is a pleasure. Marketing is something that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. So I appreciate you breaking it down a little bit to me and kind of the helping our audience here. But you have a good one, Samuel. I'll talk to you later.
Likewise, Raymond, and thanks for having me on.